to Cyber-Conversations, the show where it's okay to agree to disagree. Today, we are talking about Iron Man 2, which came out in 2010, I believe. 2010, starring Robert Downey Jr., Gwyneth Paltrow, Don Cheadle, Scarlett Johansson. This was the movie that introduced Black Widow for the first in, I don't know how many movies that she was in. So we're going to be talking about what we liked about it, what we disliked. And the point of the show is to feel free to disagree without it being the end of the world, the end of a friendship. I guess I can start. I have said this before many times, but for those who haven't heard our previous podcasts, I like every single movie in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Some more than others, but when I say I like a movie less than others, it's not that I don't like that movie, just that I don't like it as much as everything else. I mean that very literally, which I think is important for this particular movie because this is my least favorite of the three Iron Man movies.
And I was going to say that, this is Iron Man 2. What was this? The third movie in the MCU that we got. So it's funny because people like to bag on it. Iron Man 2. I liked it when it first came out.
I loved it when it first came out.
Yeah, I didn't have a problem with it. I know people were like, oh, it's got daddy issues and that type of thing. But it's like when we talk about these movies, try and get into the mindset we were. Because now it's 20 years later. We've had 10,000 MCU movies and TV shows and everything else. So there's all this context and everything else. But I find that Iron Man 2, I think, still has people still have that kind of, a little bit of a distaste for it. Like they did back then. It was just like, well, you had Iron Man 1, which kicked the whole thing off, which was everybody was like, it's Iron, it was like so amazing. And now we've got this that everybody kind of thought, it really was. It wasn't divisive per se, but it was just like, wow, that just people didn't like it as much. I thought it did a good job. I thought that it was an interesting, it really opened up the whole Tony with his, the sort of daddy issues that he had, which when you if you look at that from now, that played all the way through Tony's entire relationship, culminating in Endgame, where he actually goes back in time and gets to actually talk to his dad and validate all that stuff. So I think from that perspective, I think that Iron Man 2, like I mentioned when we did the Incredible Hulk, I think there was far-reaching consequences, especially for Tony's story. Michael, Matthew, Heather, anything you guys want to jump in on?
I was about to introduce them.
Go ahead.
So today, in addition to me and Bob, we have several guest stars who are going to be talking with us about the movie. We have Bob's son, Matthew, and his other son, Michael. And an old friend of mine, Heather, is also joining the conversation.
Yay,
anyway,
hello.
Hello.
But I definitely think we'll have a lot to talk about with this movie because I, like so many others, like it less than the other Iron Man movies. But I still really enjoy this movie. There's certain things that I think could have been done better, certain missed opportunities, but I still enjoyed it a lot.
I didn't like it initially when it came out. I thought it was a really bad movie. A lot of that at the time was Mickey Rourke's performance. Just threw me off a lot.
Really? That actually shocks me.
I don't
mean to cut you off.
No.
It's just I had more problems with Sam Rockwell than with Mickey Rourke.
I just didn't like I felt like he was overacting the entire film. But aside from that, it just didn't feel as good as the Hulk and Iron Man 1. I definitely consider this the weakest Phase 1 movie, still to this day, worse than even Thor 1, which I'd probably say is the second weakest film of Phase 1. So
Thor for the first one or the Dark World?
The first one, because that Thor 2 is Phase 2, I believe.
Oh yeah.
So, but in hindsight, rewatching it, it's not bad anymore. I still don't think it's great, and I still think it is the weakest Phase 1 movie. I feel like it had a lot going on, felt pretty disjointed. Mickey Rourke's performance now, looking at it, it's not as bad as I initially thought. But when I first saw it, I was like, wow, that was not great. So that's where I kind of stand on it, is it's just kind of middle of the pack, kind of like the Hulk. I'd probably say it's not as good as the Hulk because that's my baseline of, is it better than the Hulk or is it worse than the Hulk? So
I actually, sorry, I was just gonna say I do agree. As if you just say Phase 1, then I would say Iron Man 2 is my least favorite.
Heather, what's your hot take on Iron Man 2? Put yourself in the mindset back then and then versus now after we've gotten context.
Did you watch it in 2010?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I did. And I kind of like when you watch Lord of the Rings and you watch the middle movie, it was just a passing thing. Like it was cool and exciting for what it was, but it was, a mid kind of movie in my eyes.
Careful what you say though, because I don't think the Two Towers was a mid movie. Go ahead.
No, but I mean, like it's the middle of a story. Like it's not the beginning of a story. It's not the end of the story, and you're supposed to know some things about these characters going into it, and so it's and it didn't have like the biggest part of a story. It less defined of like one bad guy that the whole movie is about or something.
Yeah. Michael, what's your hot take on it?
I think I agree with Josh on the whole Sam Rockwell character with him playing Justin Hammer. That was definitely something that brought the movie down. His plot made, like, the purpose of him being in the film made sense. Other people are going to try to copy Iron Man and then want to weaponize it and create an army. So that made sense. But I think he was the wrong actor chosen for that role.
Yeah, he was kind of, I don't know, it was ridiculous that he's supposed to be a bad guy. He didn't pull off bad guy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
In the same way like others have in the Marvel movies.
Yeah, but that whole side of the movie was I guess I would say that whole side of the movie, they should have focused on that more and really played into that, but not made it funny, but made it more serious, because it is what would happen if some rich guy or even the government gets involved because some other rich guy made a suit of armor and the world is afraid of that. I feel like they just portrayed that poorly in the film.
I agree. I mean, I'm not familiar with Sam Rockwell's other work, so I can't say whether he's a good actor or not. I don't want to say definitively because I just don't know the guy. I don't like how Justin Hammer was portrayed in this movie, and that might not even be Sam Rockwell's fault. It might be the director's fault, or seeing this is how Justin Hammer is. But that's like the biggest complaint I have is that Justin Hammer comes off like a minion from the Minions movies. Like he's completely
the character comes off as whiny. Yeah, it's like this whiny.
We have no idea how this guy is supposedly bright enough that he has this whole weapons division that sort of rivals Stark Industries. He's got these military contracts, but this guy, I don't get the impression he knows how to tie his own shoelaces, much less build robotic suits of armor that can rival Iron Man's. This guy is a complete joke throughout the whole movie. All we see is he's completely inept. In the comic books, Justin Hammer is a very intelligent, evil criminal mastermind, a Lex Luthor of the Marvel universe.
Right.
And here he's like the Minions going, banana. He's an idiot.
Yeah. It's
I don't have the context of the comics either. So I'm just seeing this movie for what it is. I did not grow up reading comics and everything. So
what's wrong with you? What's wrong with you?
when I
you weren't raised right.
That kind of character is just, this is supposed to be the bad guy. He's kind of wimpy and whiny as far as the character. Yeah.
And I don't know if
in the movie.
I don't know if I'm jumping the gun, and we can come back to this later on. But I think that my biggest problem with the movie is that I see 3 villains in it, not just 2. And Justin Hammer is barely a villain. He might as well not even be in the movie. Mickey Rourke's character of Whiplash, I like that character, and I would have liked to see him as a main bad guy. And we're supposed to see him as the main bad guy, but he doesn't show up in the movie enough. And we don't feel connected to him enough. So I think that the real villain that we spend the most time in the movie with is Tony Stark's sickness because of the palladium poisoning. And the real climax of the movie would be when he beats that and he comes up with the new element and fixes it. He never has a problem after that.
I'd take it one step further. I think one of the biggest enemies in the movie is himself, that he's not reaching out. He's not asking for help. He's not being honest with people, with the people that are close to him. So he becomes his own enemy and gets in his own way.
Yeah, you can even look at that. And then the climax of the movie would actually be the fight between Tony and Rhodey in the two suits, which is halfway through the movie. And then everything, if you look at the normal conflict, with which is a mountain, right? And the climax is the peak, and then you have the resolution, which is the falling action, that would be half of the movie.
You know, this was the first sequel we got from an MCU movie. Again, we hadn't had anything else. There was obviously
there were a bunch of new movies.
Well, yeah, there was immense pressure. You know, we're rolling out phase one, going ahead of time. So this was an interesting movie because as Heather mentioned, it's like, this is a middle movie. It's kind of a middle of the story. So at the time it was like, do we do more of a MCU and prep more people, or does Jon Favreau, or does he make a movie which is a more, in essence, a character study of Tony and expanding his storyline, which I think was the attempt was kind of at both, which is why I think the movie was it didn't go as well as it should have. But like I said, Iron Man 2 was one of those movies where I thought it was really good, but it wasn't obviously as good as the first one. But I think looking at it in hindsight, all these years later, there's a lot more value to it, I think, than what people are giving it credit for. Because again, one of the comments I made both to Michael and Heather in one of the podcasts was phase one from Iron Man all the way to Endgame. I joked because Josh with the Star Wars references, we talk about the Skywalker saga. I joked that phase one is really the Tony Stark saga. That's what it is. It's Tony Stark starting it, and then it's Tony Stark's, he has a whole
redemption phases.
Yeah, the redemption arc. Yeah, a redemption arc, and then it ends in or whatever.
It ends in Endgame.
It ends in Endgame, and almost every story is, we joke about, we don't joke, but it's like, oh yeah, Agent Coulson, for instance, was the one who did a lot of connecting of the movies, but really it was Tony Stark who did it, and it culminates in Endgame, where he ends up finally
makes that play,
making that sacrifice for himself. One of the things that we kind of touched on it is Tony Stark's. Let's talk a little bit about Tony Stark and kind of where he's at in his life, how he's getting the palladium poisoning and that type of thing, kind of the self-destructive path. Like you mentioned, he's not reaching out and that type of thing. Do you guys feel like maybe that palladium poisoning and kind of the way it was a little bit of a metaphor for like Tony Stark burning out, his ego, kind of a self-destructive thing, getting the better of him? I wanted to talk about that.
I don't know. He kept his ego even later, so I don't know. Maybe it mellowed a little, but
his ego was part of the big problem. He didn't want to rely on anyone else. He thought he could fix it himself without asking for help. He didn't even tell Pepper, his main confidant. She had no idea throughout this entire movie.
Right.
I made you an omelet and wanted to tell you. That was near the end of the movie.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really the crux of it. With the whole movie. Again, we'll get into the villains a little bit later. I know everybody's kind of chomping at the bit to talk about that, but basically, kind of like the overall storyline is Tony struggling, the palladium issue, and everything else. Just kind of want to talk about that because that's kind of the underlying tone of Iron Man 2.
I would say I like the whole palladium storyline. I think it was interesting. Like you said, Dad, it's more of a character study. It shows that he didn't really deal with the trauma from the first movie. It's showing that he hasn't dealt with trauma before. And I think when he creates the new element, puts it in his chest, I know we talk about Iron Man 1 being the start of his arc. This is when he has that turning point of realizing like everything else is more important. Like he's not the greatest thing anymore. And I think this movie also shows off his talent as an inventor and an engineer, maybe more so than the first movie. Like, yeah, he built the arc reactor in the cave, but this one, I mean, he creates a whole new element. Like, that's pretty intense.
Well, his dad actually invented it.
Well,
yeah.
Sure, but he put it together.
I was a little bothered of kind of how quickly tied up that creating the discovering the secret that his father left and creating the new element. That was like it was condensed so much that it was like, oh, that's all it was. Yeah, like I think that I don't know. I felt like I wanted a little more out of that.
It could have been fleshed out better. Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree. Yeah, it's a montage, and he's putting together that big fusion
particle accelerator in his living room
with the Captain America shield. But no, I think overall though, I think that's a cool storyline. It shows a deeper dive into the engineering side and the how truly of a mastermind he is. I know we talked about Justin Hammer not being able to tie his own shoes, but I think that shows the dichotomy between the two characters is.
Yeah, and I guess I wanted a little more about how Tony's father came up with that. Like, that just kind of came out of nowhere. It was just part of this, model and just, okay, his father solved this problem before it was a problem. And yeah, it just kind of struck me as a little like out of left field.
Something that I think about.
The solution to the palladium problem it came
right
out of nowhere.
Yeah, a bit of a MacGuffin.
Well, I think with going with his father, I mean, he's grown up with this figure in his life, basically like teaching him like, oh, this is what I did. I helped create Captain America and I have all this success. So he's trying to live up to his father's standards. And then what did he do? He created weapons that people stole and used against other countries and stuff like that. So he's trying to use Iron Man as like a way to like make himself feel better. But in doing that, he's got the poisoning in his chest and all that and everything that's going through his body. So it's him not reaching out for help. I feel like makes sense because he's never asked for help before because he's never gone through something like all the traumatic stuff that he went through. He's never gone through any of that before.
And I think that all plays into his ego because he doesn't want to ask for help because why would he need help? He doesn't even want to admit to himself that he needs other people to help him. He's like, I'm the best. I can fix this. I don't need those peons to help me. I'm Tony freaking Stark.
Again, as we mentioned before, though, by the end of the movie, I think, there is kind of a breaking down a little bit of that ego. I won't necessarily call it
definitely.
Yeah, but I mean, again, it's more of a, he starts to realize that he's not the center of everything. And he starts to reach out, and he sees that people want to help him and that type of thing. Like when Nick Fury comes in and they do that stuff.
I think that's the beginning. I think that's the beginning of him seeing it. But I think what it really comes to a head and we see that he's realized that he needs help when he actually says about his father, when he's just finished watching the film reels of his father and he's realized that his father had the idea for this new element. And he says, been dead for, what does he say? Been dead for 20 years and he's still taking me to school.
Yeah, exactly. So let me ask this question since we've kind of touched on it. This is the thinking question. So think about this when I ask it. So looking at it back then, especially now, as we look back, because that's really what we've got now, is does Iron Man 2 tell a better story than we thought it did? Again, Justin Hammer aside and everything else, the story that's being told, the Tony Stark story ultimately, and where he's going. If you break it down that way, do you feel like it's actually a better story than we thought it was?
I think it connects Iron Man into the universe better. Like, like you said, that slight breaking down of the ego and like, oh, he does care about being part of a team a bit. He's still cocky, but I think it connects better now after the fact, now that we've seen where the rest of the story goes, if that makes sense.
I think thinking about it that way, maybe that actually answers one thing I was going to say before, and then we got sidetracked. I was thinking about the fact that, as you said, this is the only sequel this is the first sequel that we've had, but also it's the only sequel in Phase 1. The rest of the Phase 1 movies are all origin stories of the other characters, and then it comes to a head with the end of Phase 1, which is the first Avengers movie. So thinking about that, I was going to say that it doesn't really necessarily belong as a Phase 1 movie, and maybe they would have been better served holding this off to Phase 2. But now thinking about it the way you say it, I think that maybe it really is exactly where it needs to be, because taken as one whole, Iron Man 1 and 2, as one extra long Iron Man movie, that is the full origin story that we need for Iron Man before we get to the Avengers, where he's put into play. This movie is also important because it introduces Black Widow. Iron Man 1 ends with him still being so egotistical that he wouldn't really fit with the Avengers.
Right. And Iron Man 2 begins with
Iron Man,
with
shows
that
him-
same press conference then being watched
Exactly.
by Mickey Rourke's character. Matthew, what's your take on that? Again, the storyline itself, eliminating all that other stuff.
I think I kind of already answered that I like it better now than I did initially. I do think the Tony storyline is interesting. He's going through not only his issues with his dad and dealing with that and the pressure from ghosts from his past, but also, his sickness. So I think it tells a good story. It touches on the more human side than the first movie did. I mean, the first movie, we had the entire buildup of him busting out of the cave, and that was very human. But after the fact, it's back to the lavish lifestyle. I think it tells a better story than now for me than it did in 2010. Do I still think it's a good movie? It's an okay movie.
I still say that.
I think the story could have been better executed, which we talked about. If Justin Hammer maybe was more menacing, I think that part of it could have been more integrated into the whole Tony sickness storyline, which actually seems to be like the main focus, similar to how Spider-Man 3, and not going on a tangent, but we talk about studios shoving things in for the sake of money or toys. I feel like this Iron Man 2 kind of got that studio treatment, shoving things in when
A little
maybe
overstuffed.
John Favreau may have wanted to tell more intimate, peeled back layer of Tony. And instead we got that climax where he fixes himself, and then the actual climax is they're fighting at the expo. So that felt kind of shoehorned in. Anyway, long-winded answer to say, yeah, I think it tells a good story.
I want to say yes and no. And I agree with Josh on the whole, it is the second half of his origin story, because they even did that with Spider-Man with his trilogy, is that it was like one giant origin story. So yes, it being the first and only sequel in phase 1, I mean, yeah, we don't have to see it as a sequel. We could see it as that second half origin story where Tony is still learning things about himself and still growing, and he's still trying to be Iron Man, but also be Tony Stark, and then protect the world and fix the mistakes of weapons being used. If you look past the other 2 plot points that they throw in there, it's a good story for Tony Stark. The villains kind of overshadow it with their crappy storyline.
Yeah.
Well, that's what makes it a yes and no. It's a good story if it just focused on Tony more. But I feel like because they tried to distract you with the villains, that's where it's like, okay, no, we're getting off track on what the whole point of this story is, which is, yes, if every story has a villain, and it's a comic book movie, and kids want to see the hero defeat the villain, but it's like, not when the villain's goofy and the hero's going through this traumatic, very serious thing that was really well written, it gets overshadowed by the silliness of the villain.
I have a question. Do you think if this were made today and the way things are produced today, this is a movie that I could see being one of those spin-off 10-episode, telling some more backstory versus its own movie? I could see that being a thing,
kind of like a Loki
in today's modern, like Loki, or
it could be
Obi-Wan.
Yeah, and you're right. And back then we didn't have TV shows, nor I don't even know if it was even a concept they were considering. But yeah, that is an interesting way to put it. I don't know. They wouldn't have been able to do it like this. It would have been, actually, like you said, it would have been more of a Loki-ish type of. John Favreau, it seemed like, in my opinion, he was trying to walk that fine line of, well, I need to make another colossal, awesome MCU movie to keep the engine running, but at the same time, I want to dive deeper into Tony Stark and that type of thing. And that's, I think, ultimately what made it feel a little disjointed.
Yeah, because as a Tony Stark movie, it works really well. But once you put in the villains, and as they say, a hero is only as strong as his villains. And Whiplash, we don't get enough about. And Justin Hammer is a is so inept that he makes just defeating him takes no skill. So it demeans Tony Stark that he even has to deal with it.
And with that, let's move into the villains, because I know we already started talking about it, but let's get into some of these characters. So let's start with Justin Hammer, even though we kind of got into it. The spray tan was not very good.
I think he was very poorly written. They made him way too silly. A villain in, like, let's say he's like the main villain of the movie. Let's pretend that, because, like, I mean, he's the one who ends up bringing in Whiplash to help him make his suits. They didn't do it well enough to where the villain should basically throw off the hero, take down the hero for a second so that the hero has something to learn before getting back up to fight back, with the like new skills that they've acquired from facing this villain the first time. He just more became of just like a pothole in the road, like a little like bump for him to just kind of like, he was just like a quick little challenge. There wasn't anything menacing about him.
He was like a mosquito, like a gnat.
He was an annoyance and comic relief.
Yeah.
So kind of.
He wasn't, I mean, if they wrote him like, I mean, I'm going to bring up a DC film, but they wrote him like almost like Jesse Eisenberg's type of Lex Luthor, where he caused conflict between Batman and Superman, and they did it that way, where he was more menacing and scary. He just had a goofy attitude the whole time. Maybe that then would have made more sense for Tony, because then Tony's like, why am I falling apart? Why is there all this going on with me, type of thing? And he's like, he doesn't know how to defeat this villain that somehow has manipulated his world to fall apart, and Tony's world wasn't falling apart because of Justin Hammer. It was falling apart because Tony wasn't asking for help, like we said before. Yeah. And so I just think Justin Hammer was just there to just be there as like this is the plot of like a villain, but it's like, okay, cool, great job.
I agree, except that the villain that I thought he reminded me of, who was also from a DC Superman movie, he was more like Otis to me. He's not Lex Luthor. He's not even smart enough to be Lex Luthor. He's Otis.
Well, I think that Justin Hammer, I again, my personal take on it is he's supposed to be the anti-Tony. In a way, I think they did not do a good job of setting it up as like the bizarro Superman version of Tony, in my opinion. And I think they could have done a little bit of a better job of making him a foil for Tony, in that if Tony sees Justin Hammer as more of a reflection of himself, because while Tony was smart and ego driven and everything else, Sam Rockwell's, the Justin Hammer character was supposed to be all show, but he didn't have the smarts. We already talked about that. He didn't have the intelligence, and that type of thing. He just was a showman, whereas Tony Stark was kind of a showman, as well as like when he's on the racetrack, and he was like, I think it was on the racetrack or something like that, when he's getting the car, and he's always like making speeches wherever he goes. And it's like Sam Rockwell's trying to be that. I'm wondering, I guess, if it was the intention to be like, hey, this is kind of Tony seeing a reflection of himself, but in a dumbed down way. And it was supposed to be kind of an object lesson. I don't feel like, and we talked about this personally, I don't feel like Justin Hammer was a villain in the movie. He was more of an annoyance and more of he brought in Whiplash and all that other stuff, but really Whiplash was already going to do what he was going to do anyway. So I think that Justin Hammer was really just, I don't view him as more of a villain. He was just kind of an annoying prick more than he was.
Do you think if they didn't have Whiplash in there, would Justin Hammer be a better villain?
No,
not the way he was written. No, because, and we'll get into Whiplash in a minute, and I'll tell you why that's the case. But no, I don't think Justin Hammer would have been. I don't think he would have been as villainous as. I think the reverse is true. I think that if Justin Hammer wasn't in it, Whiplash might have been more menacing. But without Whiplash, Justin Hammer had no place in them. I mean, he really had no place in the movie to begin with.
Right.
Now, I don't know the comic history of Justin Hammer, but I think if from a movie and character point of view, if they had made him more of an equal to Tony Stark, but with the bad intentions, then he would have been a better villain.
Yeah.
That's what I was
instead of
thinking. If
being
they
so much less than Tony, socially and popularity and everything was less intelligence. How is he a bad guy? How is he a threat to Tony other than
Yeah.
that he has negative intentions for Tony's suit?
But that's what I'm saying, because Whiplash was the menacing one. What if
Right.
Whiplash wasn't in there? Would they have written Justin Hammer to be more menacing and evil? Like if they
Well,
just
they
only
would've-
gave us one villain.
They would have had to have a completely different version, much more like the comics. In the comics, he might have held his own because he is in every which way Tony Stark's equal, except his negative equal. But instead, we got this, and again, I want to reiterate, I have no idea about Sam Rockwell. So I'm not indicting Sam Rockwell's performance. I'm
I don't know anything
indicting
about
the
the
way
acting.
he's written. I actually was wrong. There is one movie with Sam Rockwell that I've seen, and that's Galaxy Quest. But I've never seen any other movie that he's in.
I love Galaxy
So,
Quest.
Galaxy Quest is
We're not doing a tangent here.
No,
but it's a
no,
great movie.
I'm not. It was a great movie, but that's the only thing I've seen him in. Like I hate to admit it, I've never seen The Green Mile. Everyone tells me that's a fantastic movie.
It is.
He was in
it
that.
is. Yeah. He was also good. He was also pretty good as Zaphod Beeblebrox in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Well, that's true. I forgot he's in that. That's a great movie too.
I think I might have seen that, but I don't remember it.
I guess I'm on the opposite side of the fence. I like the way the character was portrayed for Justin Hammer. I know we're going to move into Whiplash, but I not that he's a menacing villain at all. I like how the movie opens up on the Senate hearing and Justin Hammer shows up and he's basically swooping in to earn the defense contracts that Tony's abandoned. So he wasn't ever supposed to be menacing. He wasn't ever supposed to be better than Tony or his equal in this film. It was Tony stepped back and Justin Hammer got the limelight. And I think the movie opened on that really well, but it also showed his incompetence, and nobody's Tony Stark. I mean, even Obadiah Stane in the first movie couldn't figure out how Tony does what he does. That's just a continuation of this, where nobody can replicate what Tony does. And it shows when the pilot spins himself completely 180 on the top half. Justin Hammer is.
I just want to say that pilot survived.
But that's the problem, though. Like, again, it's not that he's not as competent as Tony, because that's safe to say. I mean, we do know no one's Tony Stark in this world. But to make, I have no idea how Justin Hammer even got to the point of making a half-ass suit that doesn't work. As far as I can tell, the guy's not smart enough to put together a helmet.
Well, that's why he had Rhodey go in and take the Mark II suit. They reverse engineered it. Yeah. And he offered his weapons, which ultimately, again, didn't work when he does the ex-wife missile. But I mean, the other things worked, like a machine gun.
I do love that scene where he's like, "Oh, what is this?" Where he's showing all the weapons and laying them out.
So they're smart that it'll read Odysseus to you or something like that. And
I think it's a misunderstood character in this film where people are trying to pose him as a villain, and I don't think he's trying to be a villain. Yeah, he bridges the gap between Whiplash and the rest of the story when they fake Whiplash's death. But I think Sam Rockwell, by the way, great actor. I think Sam Rockwell did a great job with what he was given. It could have been written better.
So let's move on to Whiplash. And I kind of wanted to start with and get your opinion on. So you got the Tony Stark daddy issue kind of over arc on Iron Man 2. But Whiplash starts off with his dad passing away. And that's why also, we come to, so he's having his daddy issues, which is his issue with Tony Stark. I don't think that gets played up enough. Josh, you talked about how really the arc is done once he does, or whatever it is, once he gets the palladium, that villain, quote unquote, or adversarial, issue.
Conflict.
Yeah, the conflict there is taken care of. But the thing is I think that when you think about it, I mean, there still needed to be a Whiplash scene. I don't know if they did it right, but anyway, let's get into Whiplash. Josh, I know you're the comic book guy, so it's Whiplash in the comic book versus this. So Josh, why don't you start off and talk about a little bit about what
I'm not exactly the comic book guy. I don't want to give you the impression I read the comics all the time. I have semi good knowledge of them, but I don't read them. So I don't know as much about Whiplash. I like how he was portrayed in the movie, except we didn't get enough of him.
Right.
Especially, we didn't get enough of him as Whiplash. We essentially got one scene. I don't even know if I count the final scene because he's not looking like Whiplash. He's in an Iron Man suit.
Right. And, I think it's interesting coming back to, we look at Justin Hammer, Whiplash, Tony Stark made his suit for a bunch of scraps. And then you've got Mickey Rourke making an arc reactor in a shitty apartment in Russia. And it's like, he's obviously just as smart, which comes back to what we said, which was, to be even really need Justin Hammer at all. Obviously, Whiplash was smart enough, but
we would only need Justin Hammer for his money. But then I don't know how he made that money, because the guy's such an idiot that I don't know how he has a company that ever got off the ground. But he was there to give money to Ivan Vanko so that he could build this suit. Despite the fact that he already built a suit in that little apartment. He didn't just build the arc reactor. He built the suit, the chest piece, with the electrified whips that he used in Monaco.
Heather, what's your take? Whiplash.
First of all, did they even refer to him as Whiplash in this movie?
No, they never once said Whiplash.
Okay, because I hear you guys saying it. I'm like, okay, I know who you're talking about, but I don't remember that name. But yeah, I wanted to know more about the story. I wanted more of that. Again, being a superhero villain kind of movie, he seemed like he was supposed to be the focused bad guy. And so I think I was looking for more interaction with him throughout the movie. He is the threat to Tony in this movie, other than his personal stuff, the palladium stuff. He is the external threat to Tony in this movie, not Justin Hammer so much. But so I guess I was just looking for more. I was looking for more information. I know I rewatched the movie in preparation for this. And Josh, I called you and I said, are we supposed to know who this guy is? Because I couldn't remember if we were supposed to know something about him in the beginning, because they start off the movie with with Ivan and Anton. And I'm like, wait a second, am I supposed to know something here, about these people? I just, it's been so long since I've seen the preceding movies. So, I think I wanted a little bit more of, what that was about and leading up to that.
At the very beginning of this podcast, I said that I feel like there's missed opportunities. This is the biggest missed opportunity. I think that if they had eliminated Justin Hammer and made the entire villain Ivan Vanko, I think it might have been a lot better, because I wanted to know more about him. One of the scenes I was really looking forward to seeing is when Justin Hammer takes everything away from him, and then he points to those two supposedly intimidating guards and says, these two are going to babysit you. And then after he leaves, there's just one quick shot of Mickey Rourke looking at them, and he's just like, and I wanted to see what he did to those guards. But we never see it on screen. We just see the next scene with them where they're already hanging.
The two of them hanging up there, yeah.
But I kind of wanted to see him do that, because...
I will say, in light of some of the other stuff that we talked about, if there hadn't been Justin Hammer and it was a big movie with Whiplash, we probably would not have focused on the Tony Stark personal story as much. So I think it would have overshadowed some of the Tony Stark's, moral, shift there.
Well, I still think they could have, simply because I'm thinking, again, without meaning to switch movies, but Superman 2 is about the main villains are the three Kryptonians, but they still had time for the whole romance thing where Superman gives up his powers to be with Lois. I still think that Tony could have had this whole thing with his deteriorating health, because he, his ego won't allow him to ask for help. While all this is going on, Whiplash could have been getting stronger, building a better suit. The whole time he wouldn't have been out in the open fighting Tony, but he'd be behind the scenes, and Tony wouldn't even know who the guy is, except for that one interaction, which is what we did get. I still think Tony's story could have played out the same without Justin Hammer. Well, that's all the time we have for today. Next week, we will be finishing our discussion on Iron Man 2. If you haven't already, please hit like and subscribe. It really helps us out, and I would love to know your thoughts, so feel free to comment too. In the meantime, as always, please remember to make tomorrow better than yesterday.